Hello, this is Carol Smaldino, and welcome to The Human Climate. My guest today is Rosalind Wiseman. Rosalind Wiseman is co-founder and co-director of Cultures of Dignity. She is the author of several best-selling books. They include Queen Bees and Wannabes, Helping Your Daughter Survive Cliques, Gossip, Boyfriends, and the New Realities of Girl World. Then Masterminds and Wingmen, Helping Our Boys Cope with Schoolyard Power, Locker Room Tests, Girlfriends, and the New Rules of Boy World. Rosalind is co-author of the Distance Learning Playbook for Parents, How to Support a Child's Academic, Emotional, and Social Learning in Any Setting. She has the Owning Up curriculum, a comprehensive social and emotional learning program for grades 4 to 12, which is used across the world, as are her Tiny Ideas booklets. She has moved into consulting with larger groups of teachers, parents, and younger people. And apropos, she has younger people on her staff. So welcome.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks for having me.
I'd love to know first what got you to Cultures of Dignity and how you see dignity.
Well, dignity is recognizing the inherent worth, the given inherent worth of each and every one of us. And the reason that I got to Cultures of Dignity is because I had been, like a talking head, and I was writing books, and I was in schools, but I wanted to do the work more on the ground, really listening to teachers in an ongoing capacity to understand what they needed as far as how to create a way in which young people would have a sense of belonging in their schools and feel that they had a voice that would be listened to and that they could advocate for themselves more effectively. And so we call that social emotional learning as an umbrella concept. But I wanted to be able to really understand from teachers the challenges and obstacles that made it so hard for them sometimes to do this kind of work. And so that's why I started Cultures of Dignity with my co-founder, Charlie Kuhns, about 6 years ago.
Okay, thanks. I've been thinking in preparation for this. I mean, I've had some really interesting guests, and one of the things I found is that as I get ready, I challenge myself. So it's kind of an interesting experience, sometimes difficult. But one of the things that came to mind actually in the last few days was that a mental health approach, let's say a mental health umbrella, is a value system, okay? That, for instance, you say that dignity is non-negotiable and that a person's self-worth is non-negotiable. And one of the things, just to introduce, we're at January 7th, a day after January 6th, when we are dealing with the revolt at the Capitol. And we see, really, I don't know if it's 50% or 40% of the country that would probably define dignity in very different ways. And so one of the things I'd like to ask you is how young people are helped when they have to confront people in their lives who don't see their dignity. Let's say if they're transgender or they have another political view or any of those things.
So Carol, you asked a really important question. You raised some really important issues, because I think that everybody outside of a specific situation or specific conflict are going to believe that everybody has the right to be treated with dignity. Where it gets hard is where we apply that in difficult moments. where we are arguing with people, where we have a different opinion about something, and where we are being told by social media, and we are being convinced by social media and manipulated by social media and the people who are sending those messages and then amplifying those messages to get more and more and more upset, and to get more and more, as we would say in the field, like emotionally dysregulated, and feeling like you are in the right and everyone else is in the wrong. And your anxiety is increasing so much so that you really have an almost impossible time having a civil discourse with someone else who also on the other side might be just as ramped up. So it's really hard for us, Carol. Actually, I think what's important is to understand the context in which people are having these really difficult, like acting in difficult ways and believing that their truth is the truth. But I really do believe, and this is what gives me hope, is that when we can, if we can remove ourselves from the context of that, if we can, which is a big if, and we say, do you believe in the inherent worth of all people? The vast majority of people will say yes. So there's a starting place that's really important to recognize.
Yeah, I get that. That makes a lot of sense to me. I think one of the things that I've been trying to do as well is try to talk to people who don't agree with me. Now, what I'm learning is that this would involve much more listening to people who don't agree with me, because I think that from what I've read, there are groups of people in this country who feel that their own dignity has not been appreciated. And they have gone further and further to the right, and they've become angrier because they feel that the dignity of other groups like immigrants or refugees or people who work in oil in a certain capacity that they don't are being treated better. And so they feel that the talk of dignity is for certain groups only. So, and it's a challenge because I think it's hard to get beyond the rhetoric to really listen to where these people are coming from.
Oh, it's very, very hard. I mean, I define listening as being prepared to be changed by what you hear. It does not mean that you have to agree. It just means that you walk into a conversation with that in your heart and your mind. And but I also think that, when you get to a place where someone's opinion or someone wants to act upon taking away the dignity of someone else, then you get to a place of, I cannot agree with you about that. So a specific thing would be, for me, would be the voter registration laws that have been enacted more recently in the last year. And so, if you believe, for example, if we want to go, Carol, to what you're talking about, and it's, on January, and we're talking on January 7th, that if you believe, for example, that the election was stolen in the last year's presidential elections, and you believe that elections are not, that what we have today is an electoral system that is false and fraud and all of that, then the thing that really, if you believe that, and it's a passionate concern of yours, then really it is incumbent upon you to make voting equitable and available to all people. And so, and that really means doing the work and the education. If you are passionately involved, want to be involved in, making elections more safe and more real, and that you would believe the outcome more, then I really believe it's incumbent upon that person to really educate themselves about how people in this country have been disenfranchised for generations. And then the work that you do would be so that all people could have equal access to voting. So I think that's where I'm always looking for example, in the issues that you're raising, is that you meet people where they are, and then get to a place of, your dignity is inviolable. Like, people you have the right to do, you have this inherent worth, and so does everybody else. And so what does that look like in the way that you are going to conduct yourself as you go through your life, and as you want to make a difference in life? Everyone wants to feel like they have purpose and meaning beyond themselves. That's what makes people feel like, ultimately, it's what makes people happy, is to have a meaning beyond oneself, a sense of purpose, being able to contribute, having something you're working on that's meaningful, and being socially connected in meaningful ways. And if people can do that, that's why so often people go to groups that can be sometimes so scary, is because that sense of wanting to belong is so extraordinary. It's one of those incredibly, and you've written about it, this, extraordinarily compelling motivations that we have. So if we see it this way, I think that we can approach it. It's still really difficult. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I certainly have had my incredibly difficult conversations with people, but it really does make you walk your walk, and it makes you be able to say, how am I going to be present, emotionally present, in these moments where it's really hard for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of what I write about, when I write about the shadow, I think sometimes it's helpful when we can own that, our own capacity, let's say, to get angry and to get scared, and to maybe feel what the other side is feeling,
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have to say, one of the things I've realized, because I've had this book coming out in August, called Courageous Discomfort, and it's about racial inequality, and about how we can take really get to a place where maybe possibly we can have conversations about these issues in ways that don't make people so angry or so disenfranchised. And in my doing this, one of the things that I wrote in the introduction is how much we don't learn in our United States history classes about race and the civil rights movement even. And I remember in 8th grade learning about the civil rights movement, and it really changed my life. And I had a wonderful teacher, and it really, really changed my life. But one of the things I realized writing that book is how much I did not know about, nor in our history classes, for example, are like incredibly powerful, painful stories of miners in this country, in Pennsylvania and in Colorado, the state that I live in, where the amount of oppression that some people have had in those fields is, I didn't know any of that. And so, like me thinking, wow, there's so much about things that I didn't know about the civil rights movement, even though I studied it a lot, for example, in 8th grade, and I was allowed to learn about it, and I was encouraged to be curious about it. I still didn't get a lot of information as much as I needed to. And I got nothing about the labor movement in this country, and about the strikes, and about what the really brave things that people were doing, and then being completely, the amount of violence that was happening to those people, and the poverty that they were enduring. So it doesn't take away from the racial inequities and this historic systemic racism that this country has really experienced and has participated in. It doesn't take away from that. But those stories of those people are incredibly important and need to be respected and valued.
No, I completely agree. The other thing is, I think it's important to consider that a lot of the identity that this country relies on is quite fragile. The other side of grandiosity is depression. The other side of maybe exceptionalism is humiliation. So that to teach this history, and for regions in this country that are usually opposed to allow it, would mean that the end is not just humiliation, that it's a shift, that it requires that it's strong to admit weakness, it's strong to admit mistakes. People in the South, people in Texas teach their kids to say they're sorry if they did something wrong. But when we grow up, so to speak, it feels like people will kind of come to pieces if we have to admit that we were wrong. And I agree, I'm looking forward to a guest who has a column and a podcast called Skipped History. And his specialty is getting into issues that are completely not taught. I mean, his recent issue was about groups of Vietnam veterans who went to Louisiana and were in shrimping. They dealt with shrimp, but Vietnam refugees were working with 12 people in a family, working all day, and these veterans felt out of place. They felt, it's this either or, because it's, I think sometimes when history is taught, there's one group against the other, and there hasn't been enough done to, have a real kind of peace, and a real kind of connection, a real kind of communication. So there's this resentment that keeps traveling and keeps on going. And I think the motivation has been kind of screwed up, because we need to prove we're right. We need to prove, so the odes to dignity, let's say, that we can hear politicians sing, have nothing to do with what you're talking about, because you're talking about the dignity that is self-worth no matter what. It's not dignity that's conditional.
No, it's not. I mean, that's the difference between respect and dignity. Respect, the way the word comes from Latin, meaning to look back at someone's achievements and admire them. So that means that respect is earned, at least in Western culture, that the way in which respect is defined is that you look at not just what someone's position is, but how they behave and conduct themselves. The assumption that we make about respect is that, which is an assumption which is not borne out all the time to be true, is that people in those positions act constantly and they always act in ways that merit that respect. So the position, for example, of parent merits respect. The position of grandparent, the position of police officer, the position of teacher, all of these things that position merits respect, because there's an assumption of the things that they do to be able to be in that position. But the people within those positions can act in ways that take away other people's dignity. And so when I'm talking to young people and adults, it's very powerful to say to them, look, I'm not taking away the position of, don't respect the position of teacher or police officer or parent, whatever. But if that person in that position is using the authority that they have in that position to take away somebody's dignity, then those actions do not need to be respected. And it is contrary to the actual definition and the term of respect, which is why dignity is so helpful, because you can always say, it's challenging, but you can always say that person is worthy of that person is always worth, has inherent worth, which teenagers often will say to me that I work with, well, I don't know about that either, but we've got that, but we can we have to create space for people to say, that's my parent, and they have acted in ways that take away somebody's dignity. I don't need to respect those actions, but I do need to treat them with dignity. So these words are really important to be able to hold space for both. And it allows for you, in my experience, it allows that when you have that in your heart, treating somebody with dignity and showing someone dignity and showing someone respect actually looks quite similar. But in your heart, it's different. And in doing so, you can conduct yourself in that conversation way differently, because when we have to show respect to somebody that we think is abusing power, we often think that we are now complicit or in that abuse of power, or that they've somehow we have been bullied into this, literally. And so that the power has been used to silence us and to go along with what the person's doing. And that makes us feel less than. That makes us feel less than a human being. It makes us ashamed, and we want to turn away from that. And so these are powerful, powerful drivers for people, and it stops us from being the people that we want to be. So if we can get these words and have a handle on these words and know the difference, and then have some skills to be able to recognize, like, oh, I'm feeling shame right now because I'm having to show respect to somebody that I don't, then you can have some self-compassion. And when you have self-compassion, your anxiety goes down and you're able to think through the situation, the challenge that you've got much more easily.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess what I'm thinking as you speak is that you're talking about a process. I mean, there's a process that it's so, one of the things I wanted to discuss with you was the issue of political correctness, because as something happens as with Black Lives Matter, I think that there is pressure on people to proclaim they're not being racist, and or proclaim being on board, proclaim being woke in some way. And I feel that this is kind of like a funny sidebar, but when I exercise on my exercise bike, I watch Law and Order. I may be repeating myself, but one episode, oddly enough, in 2021 was about the captain arresting a Black guy who was really doing nothing wrong and leaving alone a white woman who was filing false complaints and being a nuisance. And the captain was called into somebody's office and asked to review the situation. And the captain said, well, I just want you to know, I'm not a racist. And the reviewer said, well, maybe not explicitly, but if you and I were born in this country, we have digested racism. And if we're not going to admit that, we're not going to get anywhere. So I thought that was, I can't believe I'm watching Law and Order and it's so literate. But I think it can be so important for people to process their racism instead of being told that's racist, which is shaming. Mm-hmm. And it's shaming, and it puts it back inside a system of shame. And then people have to act like they're more woke, awake with it than they really are.
Yeah, I actually want to talk about the woke thing because I think that we need to not use that word. So woke, as far as my understanding, I could be wrong, but my understanding is that the term woke came from a lyric in the 1830s, I believe. Could have been a little bit later. I could be wrong about that. It just had a little bit of it could be sometime in the mid 1800s, where a Black folk singer wrote a song about being awake and needing to be vigilant because of the lynchings that were occurring. And it was after Reconstruction. So it was a tremendous amount of violence that was happening to Black people in the country. And so the lyrics are about being vigilant and being awake, keeping your eyes open. And I think what is happening among the left is that, and I don't even like in some ways using that term, is that, I work with young people, teenagers, people in their 20s, adults, but the term woke has become a way to dismiss whoever is speaking and whatever the content is that person is speaking about. And I think it's really important to be very clear about words. And so woke, I think, is being very, very expertly manipulated to dismiss the foundational concerns and realities that people have had in this country around racism. And so it is also because we don't tend to in this country, look at our history of like, well, wait, where's that term coming from? Is that we need to really understand the politics of words that are used. And so people on what I would guess would be calling the progressive left are also starting to using that word. And I want us to actually, I think we need to not use that word or not reclaim it, but to able to say it in a way that does deference to the history and also does not get caught in this manipulation of using it in a dismissive way or the other people are doing so. And that's just the latest example of words like that. I mean, politically correct and PC is sort of right behind that. So, or, sort of like a baby version of the term woke. So, and on the opposite side, or not opposite side, there is also a real vibrant issue that we have where people who feel that they can't say certain things, or if they're in a group, if you say safe space, I know a lot of young people feel that as soon as somebody says this is a safe space, that becomes a term of laughing at it. Or it becomes a term where it's actually not safe. It's actually like a word that means you have to have certain opinions. And if you want to question those opinions, then you are going to get slammed for it. And that's reality. I mean, that is reality. So I think what's most important is to be able to figure out and to have the honesty of a lot of people that I know who agree with me politically, but are contributing to creating these spaces that are seemingly safe, but are not, for people who have different opinions or literally have questions and don't understand. And so we have to be able to create places where people are able to ask questions and not feel like they're going to get beat up or alienated for it or shamed for it. Because of course, they're going to go to other people who are going to say, yeah, you're right. You have the right to ask questions. And those people are ridiculous anyway. So it's really important to be able to say, instead of, people can make fun of me about this too, because young people I work with, it's easy to make fun of all this kind of stuff in some ways, because it sort of makes you uncomfortable, or it can seem so supercilious or superficial, or we see things on social media so that we don't take it seriously. But I don't really believe in safe spaces. I believe in brave spaces. I believe in a person, people in a group, having the safety to be uncomfortable, that we can only learn when we are uncomfortable. And that we, of course, have to be at a place where if we feel that we've gotten to a place where it's too much, that we have the skills to be able to somehow say, this is too much for me. And that the people in the space with us will recognize that, will recognize and say, I get it, or like, thank you for telling me, instead of ridiculing it or all of that. So I think we've got some work to do in the spaces that we think that we're trying to create these open dialogues when we really aren't. And I would say that if you're listening to this and you work with young people and one or two people are dominating the conversation, which is very normal, then that means you don't have a safe space. That is your indicator that when you're in a group of people and only one or two people are dominating the conversation, there are a lot of other people who have a lot of different opinions, but they don't feel safe saying it. And that should be the cue to all of us that we need to stop and we need to talk about what it's going to take to be in the presence of each other and feel that we can say our truth, but then and that our truth is not the truth. It is our emotional truth in this moment, and that we have the right to participate and be curious and not be slammed for being curious. And I think when we do that, if we can recognize when we get to those places, then we have a little bit more of a chance of having the actual conversations that we went to in the first place.
So, that brings to mind the issue of microaggressions, like in schools and universities where certain topics can't be spoken about because they're going to offend certain people. Mm-hmm. How do you feel that fits in?
Oh, well, I think that, so here's the thing. I think that microaggressions feel like, this is what we write about in Courageous Discomfort, is that it feels like 1,000 small paper cuts. And paper cuts are very painful and they are very irritating. And sometimes you can't even see them. But you don't want to walk around with like, even one paper cut is like super, super painful. So imagine if, every day, or every week, that at some point you're just going to have a terrible paper cut on your hand. And that's a terrible way to go through life. And it's so small. This is a little small thing, but it's not. It's really not. And so I think that's one thing to think about, is that they're painful and yet in some ways they're invisible. I think the second thing is for people to understand that everybody can relate to a situation where somebody has said something deeply offensive to you and you think, oh, I'm not going to deal with it. I'm just not going to deal with it. I'm not going to have a conversation about it. It's not worth it. And you have very good, meaning understandable reasons for not saying so, for not saying what you don't like. So that's a lot of reasons why people who are having microaggressions done to them don't feel comfortable, all the time saying, oh, that thing you just said is obnoxious. Oh, that thing just hurt my feelings. Or, oh, that thing made it really difficult for me to feel like I can be in my workplace and get my work done. So I want people to understand and be able to empathize a little bit with, or sympathize with, we've all been in situations where people have offended us, and we've all been in situations where we haven't said anything, and we all felt that we had good reason for not saying anything. So, and then sometimes we like sit on it and we blow up about something small, but we're not blowing up about that really small thing. We're blowing up about the legacy of all these other things that have happened beforehand. And we just happened to for whatever reason, that was a thing that just was like, it's enough, which is why a lot, in these situations, sometimes people will be like, that is enough. But it's not a small thing. It's, from the history of all the other stuff, all the other things. And the other part about microaggressions is that they're so tricky because it's really oftentimes about tone and about intent. So the one that's the classic is, where are you from? So if I ask with curiosity to, if I'm a freshman not my first year, my first year in college, and I meet somebody and I say to them, oh, so where are you from? With curiosity, that is not a microaggression. That is showing in my curious question that I care. I'm like interested in you and I want to know about you. I'm showing you dignity because I'm like, oh, I want to know more about you. But the same question of, oh, so where are you from? Or where are you really from? Is absolutely different, but the words are the same, but the tone conveys a completely different message, which is, you don't belong here, so why are you here? You don't deserve to be here, so why are you here? And so that's a non-curious question that is made to actually take the person's dignity away and to make them feel alienated and feel insecure. So that is a microaggression. And so it's really important to be able to distinguish the dynamics that can make it so easy to blow off microaggressions and make fun of them and talk about woke culture and all of that. And it's really important to acknowledge that they are real and they have real consequences for people.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you about anti-Semitism a little. I don't know if you see that rising or, then, I mean, there is the issue of Israel and Palestine and how loaded that can be in a classroom. But so I think it's one good subject because I, for one, and I am Jewish, and I have mixed feelings and I have confusion. And I just recently was reading something about, other countries that mistreat Palestinians and aren't focused on. And then sometimes I step back because part of why I'm doing this podcast is so, to encourage people, all of us, to question our own assumptions. And I find that that's much harder than it seems. And yeah, so one of the things I've thought of is, all of the things that are committed by this country. We have Guantanamo open, we have systemic racism, we have issues with immigration, we have all kinds of issues. And then we're supposed to talk about like boycotting Israel or boycotting China because of how they treat a tennis player. And I don't mean to laugh at that. I don't like the way she seems to have been treated, but it is a known dictatorship. So I expect different things from a country that's supposed to be a democracy than I do from a country that's supposed to be a dictatorship. And I think that it's easy if I'm in a group of, progressive people to feel very much on the outside or like I can't express myself. I can't even express the confusion that I have because I am confused, and no doubt there's been a lot of pressure on me through the years, even unconsciously, to support Israel and a certain amount of loyalty, because of the Holocaust and all kinds of other factors. And so it's hard to process when there's so much pressure.
Yeah, I grew up a little bit with that too. I had a grandmother who was very pro-Israel and would not counter any kind of questioning of any kind. I think we all need to embrace being confused. I think we all need to just say a lot. I am really confused and I'm doing my best to be less confused. And so I'm educating myself on, both on all different kinds of sides of approaching X issue. I think we all need to really embrace, like, I am deeply confused about things, and that is okay. As long as, and this is why dignity is so important, as long as I am focused on upholding the dignity of all people, I can be confused as I try and figure out the world around me. And so we can say, I have felt a lot of pressure in my life about agreeing, to support, what does it mean to support Israel? here are the things that I've learned about experiences with Palestinians in other countries. So it doesn't take away from the pain and I'm losing my word, the pain and the experience of Palestinians in Israel. It doesn't take away from that experience. And really, as Jewish people, we are supposed to be critically analyzing our behavior in the world, and our individual behavior, our collective behavior in the world. We should be doing that as much as, in this area. That is actually, to be loyal, in my mind, is not to just support somebody no matter what. It is actually loyalty is saying, you are part of me, you are part of my group, and I disagree with you, and here are the reasons why. And that means that loyalty is not based on power and domination. It is based on a sense of dignity between two people or two groups of people. So that, to me, is the goal, is being able to, say, like, I am deeply confused about the world that I'm living in. And I don't know all of the answers, but what I am committed to is trying to be as curious as possible, to learn as much as possible, and to listen to others as much as possible, and to listen to myself as much as possible. And, I think that if we can be angry and upset and scared and reactive about people that we believe don't politically agree with us. But if we're not going to speak out to people who we think do politically agree with us, then we're not doing what we need to do. And we're not living the life that we say we want to. I mean, I don't know how helpful it is to just agree, to look like we agree with people that we might vote similarly, but we have deep, we don't feel that we can say in a group of people that we believe to be like-minded, yeah, I actually don't agree. If we can't do that with people that are supposed to agree with us or have some kind of commonality, we sure can't do it with anybody else. Right. So that's the work that we have to do ourselves, to hold, to keep ourselves in integrity, and to actually also know, like, what we're agreeing to, because I don't know what we are agreeing to with people that we think we're in alignment with if we can't speak our truth to them.
No, I think that's crucial, because I think that it's a fake kind of belonging then. And, sometimes we can feel humiliated, but it's, as you say, it's recognizing where we are and maybe moving with that. Plus, loyalty, I've thought for a long time, it's like, if you're loyal as a parent, let's say, to your child, if you see your child in a messy situation, in a potentially destructive situation, you're going to want to interrupt that. That's being loyal. It's not being, just that you swear undying loyalty, like you're following orders, which we know where that led to. And, the other thing is, I agree with you about confusion. I had a social work teacher who used to almost jump up and down when anybody said they were confused, because he got so excited because he said, confusion, it's the beginning of knowing something. And I know that people who are in science love confusion. They not only love confusion, but they love mistakes, because real science is, exciting. It's exciting to find mistakes, because then you know how to proceed. And I think what's important is, it's certainly important for me, that when there's a feeling of humiliation, it can feel like the end. It can feel like the end of the discussion, the end of the process. You just sit and bow your head and you retreat. But I think it's really crucial to know, it's like, I have this thing, many people have this thing about going through pain, getting through it, and then you get to something else. That it's not the end, it's not the only feeling, but it's a true feeling. And, the other thing is, a true feeling could be a signal. If you're feeling humiliated, it could be a signal that you actually are being treated in a humiliating way. I mean, sometimes we just are sensitive to our own stuff, we get triggered, but sometimes we're picking up on something.
Sure.
And we're learning about our surroundings, and so we can pick up on it and start to protect ourselves and do all the things you talk about in terms of setting boundaries. And so I think I'm very excited about the truth of confusion, and finding ourselves when we feel humiliated, and knowing that there's a process out of it to become more constructive, and more feeling the dignity of ourselves. So, then when we confront people who can't do that, like when we confront a person in our family, let's say, who can't accept a transgender child, and that child, that young adult, gets help to really feel their own dignity, then it can be less painful. I mean, it's always painful to feel rejected, just as it's always painful to realize that we have a legacy of racism and cruelty in our country. But once we can mourn that and have some belonging, in the sense of some support, and I don't mean just belonging in a group, but some real support, I think that we can feel stronger. And this conversation makes me feel actually a little more optimistic, because
Good, great.
I keep thinking of, well, what would we do if we were in Texas? But you know what? And that's a generalization, I realize, but I think that the ownership of our own process is so crucial. And it's much more, for me, deep than just spouting ideology, because I think, that's going to get us nowhere. And I'm just saying, for me, it's a New Year's, I'm really not planning on resolutions, but I like the idea of, well, I'm not watching so much news. I'm staying away from the media hype. I'm really trying to be in my own confusion. And I said to you before, this podcast is helping me, because as the book helped me as I was writing it, my own, because every chapter brought about my own confusion and my own place in the problem. And so, as Jung would say, that's probably a start, owning our own place, and then hoping to get through it, and hoping to meet people, which, talking and listening can do. As you say, prepare to be surprised. And I think, Carl Jung said, like, leave your knowledge at the door and prepare to be changed. And so I like it.
Good,
So
I'm glad.
I'm excited about your work. I still hope we can collaborate, but I loved having you on. And hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Carol, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, take care.